Chapter 11, Recording Part 2, Building the Railway. 1857, John Palliser is sent to explore the prairies to find a railway route to the Pacific. 1867, Confederation makes Canada a country. The Prime Minister, John A. Macdonald, had plans to expand Canada from sea to sea. Work on the railroad begins in British Columbia and heading east. Many Chinese workers are hired. 1880, the construction of the railway starts near Thunder Bay, Ontario. European immigrants provide much of the labor. 1881, the government grants the CPR $25 million and 25 million acres of land. The CPR begins land sales and begins to establish nearly 800 prairie town sites. 1882, Cornelius Van Horn is hired to get construction moving quickly. 1883, Father Lacombe persuades Isapum Akasi, Sika, also known as Crowfoot, shown on the left, to allow railway through Siksika lands. 1884, the CPR sets up 10 experimental farms. A railway cart of wheat and produce from these farms is provided to attract Ontario and Quebec settlers. 1885, troops are moved by rail to respond to the Northwest resistance. 1885, the Canadian Pacific Railway is completed at Craigleshie, British Columbia. What were the advantages of having a cross-Canada railway completed? Do you think the railway would benefit everybody? Why? Reasons for coming. Why did various people make the choice to come to what is now Alberta? There were many things that drew new settlers to what is now Alberta. For some, it was the land and opportunities. Others were escaping difficulties. The Canadian government was also encouraging people to settle in Western Canada. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, thousands of people left their homelands and made the journey west. These included Mennonites, Icelanders, Mormons, and Hutterites. French, Dutch, German, Italian, Portuguese, Spanish, Swiss, and Norwegian people came from Western Europe. Ukrainian, Romanian, Polish, and Hungarian people came from Eastern Europe. All became part of Alberta's story. Coming for business. Many people came west from Ontario in the 1880s. They spoke English and were familiar with the government, law, and education systems being set up in the Northwest Territories. Francophone people came from Quebec to join family members. Some settlers came as farmers. Others were doctors, lawyers, laborers, teachers, and business people. They started banks, stores, and churches. Coming as a community. Many German-speaking people from countries such as Poland, Russia, and Germany moved to the United States. They stayed together in communities. They began to settle in what is now Alberta in the 1880s. Many had learned English. They had also obtained animals and equipment for farming. The first German settlers in Alberta came to Pincher Creek area in 1883. 6 years later, 100 families moved together from Europe to live near Medicine Hat. When the railway between Canada and Calgary and Edmonton was completed, more groups moved north to areas near Edmonton. Around Stony Plain and Leduc today, over half the population has German roots. Coming to ranch. My class went on a field trip to the Bar U Ranch National Historic Site. It is a 1.5-hour drive southwest of Calgary. The Bar U Ranch started back in the 1800s. The ranchers in southern Alberta provided beef for the Northwest Mounted Police and First Nations. Many of the Northwest Mounted Police officers became friends with the ranchers. Some former officers became ranchers. Guess what I got to write notes on? Yes, postcards again. Fred Stimson helped start the Bar U Ranch. Today people tour his National Historic Site. Ranches, up to 100,000 acres, could be rented for 21 years. The cost was 1 cent per acre per year. Huge ranches developed. Ranch hands moved to the area from eastern Canada, the United States, and Britain. Bayou, famous for excellent cattle and horses bred there. John Ware learned his ranching skills in Texas. He later worked at the Bayou Ranch and founded 2 ranches. John Ware was born into slavery around 1845 in the southern United States. When free of slavery, came to Canada and the Bayou driving a herd of cattle. Known as the best horse rider in Canada, a legendary steer wrestler. Coming to a British colony. Many young men immigrated to what is now Alberta from Britain. Some went to work on ranches, others also with British roots arrived from Ontario or the United States. Some had special skills in mining or in railway and house building. The rapid growth of towns and cities in Alberta gave them job opportunities. Many young men sought to adventure and saw themselves as building the British Empire, the group of colonies under British rule. So you can pause here and read these 2 passages if you'd like. Coming for a new life. In the mid-1800s, farmers in Iceland had many problems. Winters were cold, springs were wet, and volcanic ash often covered their farms. A group of farmers went to the United States. In 1888, they moved to the area of Tindastól, later renamed Markerville, just outside Red Deer. Many of the Icelandic farmers had herds of sheep and cows. In 1899, the community started the Markerville Creamery. It was in operation until 1972 and today is a museum. Activities at the yearly cream day in Markerville include cow and goat milking, separating cream, and churning butter and ice cream. Coming for religious freedom. Some groups, such as Hutteries, wanted to find a place where they would have religious freedom. Another religious group of settlers, Mormons, came to Alberta in 1887. They traveled from Utah in the United States in covered wagons. Cardston was named after Charles Orr Card, who led the group. The settlers from Utah were welcomed. They brought know-how in irrigation and farming methods for dry areas. Among the group was Samuel Matkin, his wife Sina, and their children. He had been born in England and moved to Utah. His journals tell some of the new settlement's story. 1889, a year in the life of Samuel Matkin. So you can pause and read this if you would like. This is Canada's first Mormon temple. It is in Cardston. Early schools. Schools were important to families who lived or were thinking of living out west. Groups of parents would get together to make sure schools were built. These schools often had only one room for all the grades. Schools usually had few books. Most of the literature, history, and geography lessons were about the British Empire. All the children were taught the words, "God save our gracious Queen." Early writing equipment included a slate pencil, a bottle of water, and a rag. Ink bottles and pens were also used. Hi, Meeling. This week, my class stepped back in time when we visited Edmonton's 1881 schoolhouse. We sat to a desk, boys on one side of the room and girls on the other. The classroom had a picture of Queen Victoria. It also had the Union Jack flag that was used by Great Britain and Canada. We saluted the flag with these words: "I salute the flag, the emblem of my country, and to her I pledge my love and loyalty." The desks had ink bottles and holes. We used pens, nibs, and ink to practice writing. We also had drills and fast math using slates and chalk. And we took part in a spelling bee. Please write back, Peter. So this is a picture of 1881 schoolhouse. Schoolhouse stories. Stoves were used for winter heating and could be dangerous. In Sunny Nook one day, a loose leg of the stove fell off. Red hot coals and hot pipes scattered. The students quickly got the stove propped up. They gathered the hot coals and fixed the leg in stovepipes and carried on as normal. In the early days, families were responsible for supplying a desk of some sort for each of their children at school. Often, desks were just benches. Many children sat on empty wooden crates or planks held up by wooden blocks. Students sliding on seats must have suffered a few slivers. In Edson, the teacher had to take the children in a lumber wagon to the mobile dental clinic. The teacher also had to hold the students on the desk when the dentist drilled and filed. Rural schoolhouses often had a place for the students' horses. It was the students' task to clean the barn. This story is told in a book called The Little White Schoolhouse. John Pierce, a pupil in the Nemeo School District, thought he had the perfect solution to cleaning the barn. He brought along a supply of blasting caps to do the job for him. These are small explosives. The resulting explosion blew the roof off the barn and gouged a huge hole in the floor. But the manure was still there after the dust had settled. Advertising the West. The Canadian government and the Canadian Pacific Railway, CPR, worked together to promote the West. The CPR needed passengers and freight to pay the enormous costs of building the railway. The Canadian government wanted settlers for the millions of hectares in Canada's West. By 1896, the government started a huge plan to boost immigration. By 1900, agents were found across the northern United States. Agents received money for every person they convinced to travel to Canada. Between 1900 and 1910, nearly 500,000 Americans moved to Canada. The Canadian government told people that the Western Canada was the last best West. Free land in Canada was advertised on this arc in London, England. Becoming a province. How do names tell stories of Alberta's history? In 1884, Frederick Cotelain was the first and only premier of the Northwest Territories. A premier is the leader of a province or territory. Halt Lane thought the areas now known as Alberta and Saskatchewan should be combined into one province named Buffalo. Prime Minister Laurier thought such a big province would be difficult to manage. His government wanted two provinces of about the same size. It was decided there would be two provinces. In 1905, the new provinces of Alberta and Saskatchewan were created. People gathered in Edmonton to celebrate as Alberta was made a province of Canada. Alexander Cameron Rutherford. Alexander Cameron Rutherford became Alberta's first premier. First he was appointed, and later he was elected. He was in favor of spending government money to provide grade school education for everyone in Alberta. He also started a telephone system, and major railways and roads were expanded in Alberta. There is a school named Rutherford in Edmonton. Are other places named after him? Naming Alberta. The Marquis of Lorne, the son-in-law of Queen Victoria, represented the British Crown in Canada. He was asked to name the new province. At the time he wrote this: "In token of the love which thou hast shown for this wide land of freedom, I have named a province vast and for its beauty famed by thy dear name." The name of the new province was Alberta. It was named after the Queen's daughter and Marquis's wife, Prince Louise Caroline Alberta. People in Calgary and Edmonton wanted their community to be named the capital of Alberta. Those in Red Deer, Banff, Medicine Hat, Athabasca, and Blackfields had the same idea. Residents of Vegreville, a population of 78 at the time, also wanted their community to be selected. Eventually, Edmonton was chosen. One of the reasons was its central location in the province. The construction of the legislature building was started in 1907 and finished in 1912. What is in a name? Bingo. Coronation is a town named in 1910 to honor the coronation of King George